We're back for another episode of season 2, and today I'm joined by John Kennedy, the head of HR Organisational Development with Erin O'Dearn or RSL. And John, you're a former apprentice and you served 38 years in RSL or
38 in total, yeah.
38 in total.
34 since I came back and 4 years of my apprenticeship.
Grand. And look, who is Erin O'Dearn? What are you guys doing?
What are we doing? Obviously, everyone knows us as we run the trains for the country, but I think we're trying to become a bit more involved with the whole approach towards sustainability within the company and being the public transport backbone of Ireland's approach towards carbon neutrality and things like that. So our whole approach is towards, and from an All Ireland point of view, we're involved with strategy and improving and growing the railway at this stage.
Okay, so brilliant. A lot happening there. A lot of progression.
Yeah.
But in terms of apprenticeships, right? So RSL offer 4 apprenticeships.
4 apprenticeships, that's correct.
What are the different categories of apprenticeships?
We offer fitter, mechanic, electrician, and vehicle body repair.
Okay, grand. And let's say someone's applying for one of these apprenticeships. What's the process they're going through when they're applying? Like, so are they submitting a CV, or are they just applying on the website, like with a cover letter? Or?
No, it's an application form filled in, and that sort of gets them into the process. And we work with a partner who helps us with the sort of shortlisting and sort of evaluations of the different applications. But people must have 5 passes in either junior or leaving certificate, of which both English and mathematics have to be a pass in that sense, of the 5.
And that's leaving cert?
Leaving cert or junior cert.
Or junior cert, okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the age limits then, can someone apply for an apprenticeship with RSL at 16, or do they have to wait till they're kind of a certain age?
No, traditionally it would have been sort of between the ages of 16 and 18 type thing when I was an applicant back in 1983. But nowadays we find graduates who are sort of saying, gone through college, yeah, like the experience, but don't really like what I'm kind of trained in and would like to go back. So there's no real sort of age limit per se, but it's not the old traditional way it used to be when
with school leavers.
With school leavers in that sense.
Okay, that's good. I've actually noticed that across the span. Like, there's a lot of people are taking on apprenticeships, into their 20s, mid-20s even. Yeah. Some people, which is good.
Yeah, we found that when we started in earnest back in sort of 16 to get back onto this track.
Yeah.
One of our applicants was an expat living in New Zealand who was 20 odd and just wanted to come home and sort of said, yeah, I like that.
Give it a bash.
Yeah, and was successful, and
grand. And the interview process then with yourselves, right? Is there like a phone screening? Is it like face-to-face interviews, or what's the first stage that someone will go through?
It's face-to-face interviews. It's normally done by one of our technical guys and one of our HR people as well, and it's a competency-based. As an organisation, we work on competency-based interviewing.
Okay.
So we look at kind of technical aspects of the role, safety, communications. But in real terms, what the guys are looking for is attitude and sort of willingness to learn. Needs to be. People need to be, how would I call it? Really, really interested, and that's what makes you shine out.
Yeah.
I think in our interview process, talking to the guys that are more involved with it now than I am, that's what they say. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, an interest in what it is they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And after the interview stage, then is there like a test or a practical assessment that they go through?
No, there's assessment tests beforehand. Okay. Then kind of that's how we shortlist in that sense. We get to the interview stage, and it's sort of at that stage whether John or Connor gets the job per se.
Grand. And then psychometric testing then as well?
That's involved as part of the assessments.
Okay, grand. And there's no, is there a medical as well? Or?
There would be medical for all roles within Erin and within the COE group. There is a medical before you start in any case.
Okay, yeah, so it's interesting enough.
Well, particularly for electrician, one couldn't be colourblind, unfortunately. There are. We don't want to be putting the red wire where the blue wire should be, etc. In that sense,
Disaster,
yeah.
Okay, grand. And then you also served as an apprentice with RSL. That's how you started.
I did, yeah. It seems a long time ago now.
Yeah. What was the apprenticeship that you done yourself?
I'm a fitter turner by trade.
Okay.
And so we started on the 6th of September 1983.
Right, okay. Long time ago now.
Yes.
The
indeed.
apprenticeship's definitely changed, I suppose, over the time.
It has. The junior and senior trade certificate that I would have sat through are different. It was time-based. It's a module-based approach nowadays.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of a big change. And I think the way technology has moved on, the trades have moved on as well. I
Yeah.
don't think they're as rigid as they once were in that sense. And so with technology, with sort of advancements, and particularly if I speak, from an Iarnród Éireann point of view, the way our fleet has changed.
Yeah.
The way our fleet used to be sort of traditional loco hauled fleet, people would have been familiar with growing up, well, people in their 60s and 50s and things like that, to the more modern rail car, kind of dart car. And our new units that are coming in are going to be battery electric. We've signed a significant sort of order in that sense. It's going to be a huge fleet, and it's going to be a big change for the organisation.
Yeah, massive. And do you remember your first day then as an apprentice?
I do. It started, we had to be in Inchicore in the training centre for 2:00.
Okay.
And we went into this big room, and there was about 70 of us that were started as first years.
Right.
And again, like we said previously, they were between the age of 16 and 19. Now I was only 16, so I was kind of one of the youngest.
Right.
And at that stage, there was a big difference. Kind of 19-year-old, they were men, and we were 16-year-old, still a boy type of thing. But it was very intimidating at the beginning. But and then unfortunately, when we started, there was an industrial dispute going on, so that kind of was a bit. But listen, it was looking back at it now, it was a great time and great learning.
Okay, yeah. And why did you decide to become a fitter, or did you just apply for any apprenticeship and just hope you got one?
My two older brothers, I'm the youngest in the family. My two older brothers were craft workers. One was an aircraft technician in the Air Corps, and the other was a fitter with the ESB. So my father kind of approached me in February and sort of said, fill out these. He gave me 4 application forms.
Okay.
CIE, ESB, the Air Corps, and the Post and Telegraphs as it was at the time. So I did the exams in each of them. Well, the Air Corps said I was too young, but I did the 3 exams, got an interview for CIE, and was lucky enough to get the job. Didn't get it originally. Someone failed a medical.
Oh, okay.
And I was next on the list.
Yeah,
so.
right. And generally you were shortlisted then. Would you be brought in then on the following draft of apprentice?
No, each year at the
it's a new
time, each
competition.
year was a new competition.
Okay, so it's good to know. And then in terms of it, like the fitter apprenticeship then, what was the different phases that you moved through back then? Like how were they different to now?
First year we were in the training centre itself for a full year.
Yeah.
We used to do day release into Bolton Street. The electricians would have done day release into Kevin Street.
Okay.
We used to do 1.5 days, and it was very protected within the training centre. There was only the 28 of us were fitters. 7 were CIE. We had 3 from the Irish Glass Bottle Company, as it was. 2 from Guinness's, 1 from Donnelly Mirrors, used to be a place in Nace, not sure if it's still there. And the rest were kind of 1 year off the job Anco apprentices, as it was at the time.
Okay.
Now Solus, like, I mean.
Yeah.
And but it was very protected. You weren't in the big bad workshops.
Oh, okay.
So we were just doing sort of, turning and milling and bench fitting on a daily basis.
So you're kept out of the garage for a while, were you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was only when we went into our second year that we used to do a 3-month rotation in the various workshops within Inchicore and then outside of Inchicore as well. Inchicore being the main engineering location.
So your apprenticeship was all like off the job training before they even let you on site?
Yeah, for the first year it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
How did you find that? Like, would you prefer to be, on site in the garage or?
Oh, I enjoyed it when you get out into the workshops.
Yeah.
It is enjoyable because, you meet a whole character of people, and that's always good. And that's always good for an individual in that sense. And I enjoyed it. We used to do 3 months. Then in second year, we did 3 months of block release full-time in Bolton Street.
Right.
And same in third year, we would have done 3 months full-time at Bolton Street, would have done our senior trade exams at the end of that. Yeah. And then in fourth year, we did 3 rotations of 4 months for a final year, because fourth year was real. You were treated as not a full craft worker per se, but you were given a lot more responsibility in the workshops.
Oh, okay. And someone that's going in now, right, as a fitter, would they be on site straight away, or is it the same situation? They're off site.
We do sort of a lad called Connor Doolan, who runs our kind of as our lead apprentice sort of person at this stage. Connor kind of takes them in and they do some basic sort of training in that regard, and then they go out into the workshops, in that sense. And so that's kind of when we approach, and it's modular based now as compared to time based when I was doing it.
You're doing it. Okay, so it's a big difference. And back then, right, would you have travelled once you kind of got out of college, right, and you're into like your second year? Would you have travelled around the country, like to the different sites, like working, or would you be based in Inchicore full time?
No, you would have been based in Dublin,
Okay.
if I was to use that phrase. We would have taken on apprentices back in the time for, say, some of our locations, particularly the bus garages, which is now Bus Éireann and Dublin Bus.
Yeah.
They would have taken them on, and they would have, say, gone to the Limerick garage or the Dundalk garage or Cork and things like that. So if we had a requirement for craft workers in Limerick, one would have done his first year's training in Inchicore, and then gone back to Limerick. But if you were Dublin based, we didn't have as many. Like we had Fairview, which was the Dart depot.
Yeah.
We used to have a place in where's Grand Canal Dock train station now used to be a train depot for our yellow plant fleet that look after the infrastructure side of the business, and then mostly was all based in Inchicore.
Okay. And is that the same situation now for guys now? Like are they moving around, or are they based?
They're moving around a bit more now because we have our DMU depot opened up in Drogheda in the early 2000s. We have our DMU depot in Portlaoise that opened up in 2008. So our sort of Inchicore is not the main it is the main engineering function, but we have other depots now that look after the different fleets within the organisation.
Okay, so it's spread out now.
It is spread out a bit more, yeah.
Okay. And can someone, let's say someone doesn't get the option in Dublin, can they, opt to work in Dundalk then, or Drogheda?
Well, like when we recruit as a company now, we're looking at where the vacancies are, and we're trying to give the apprentices as much opportunity to work in those locations where ultimately the vacancies may arise. But the two kind of business units look after that themselves in that regard, and they see where the sort of vacancies should be and how people are getting on, etc. So it's managed kind of that way.
Yeah, all right, interesting. And back then to your apprenticeship, right? Did you have to do a shop run back in the day, like for anyone, or was there a canteen on site?
No, there was I wouldn't call it a canteen. There were generally at this stage in the 80s, there was a few tables and a Burco boiler, and that was about it.
Okay.
No, at the time, CIE as it was, we used to have a lad who would have gone to the shops in each of the workshops, so I never had to do that. But funny enough, one of the jobs that I had after I got let go from CIE in 87, I worked in a small engineering company, and one of the tasks would have been that I would have gone to the shops. Particularly, we had a bit of a downturn, and I was only thanks to one individual, the lead hand at the time, and he sort of said, "Listen, will you go to shops all the time and you sort out the steel and clean the whole workshop up?"
Yeah.
And that kept me in a job for about 2 months. The gaffer was seeing me busy all the time, so okay. And then we got a big order in, and I was back on the machines. Yeah, I would have gone to the shop. It's something I would have done. I would have done it.
That's good. Did you ever mess it up or get anyone's lunch wrong?
No.
Lucky enough.
Luckily enough from that point of view, I always have a paper and pencil handy. Yeah, John doesn't like mayonnaise. Make sure you know that.
Doesn't get it.
Things like that.
Put salt in someone's tea instead of sugar.
Yeah, no.
Grand. And then back to CIE, right? Did you finish school or do your leaving cert before you took your apprenticeship?
I didn't know if it was, as I said, it was February of 83, and my dad would have been doing the leaving cert in 84. I wanted to do the leaving cert, as strange as that sounds, because I was more academically inclined than my two brothers.
Okay.
That's just the way it was. They went to technical school, I went to a kind of secondary school.
Okay.
And I never really, I had no designs on being an apprentice. I didn't really know what they did, to be truthful. And I found, the one thing I did find, and it's the piece of advice I would give to people, is that when you're studying the likes of physics in school, it can seem very abstract.
Yeah.
And how does that work? When you're actually doing it on a day-to-day basis, suddenly the technical side of it becomes clearer, because you're understanding a bit more in relation to how things work. So the learning becomes easier. I found it personally. That's the advice I give to people in that sense.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't particularly want to be an apprentice, but fathers back then had a way of just looking at you.
Yeah.
So I said it to my dad at the time. Copy go to him and said, "I don't really want to be an apprentice." And he looked at me and said, "Fill out the forms." Yes, Dad.
No choice.
No choice. So once I started, then I kind of got into it because I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I'm very much, that's how I ended up in HR. I'm a people person, and so I enjoyed the camaraderie, and I learned worked with some great people, really, really great people, and the culture within the organisation of looking after people. And one thing a story I was keeping me was in one of my, I think it was in third year, one of the fitters I was working with says, "Will you carry my tools?" And another fitter came over and said, "Put that toolbox down, John." He said to the other fellas, "Carry your own tools.
Right.
That chap's here to learn." So I was working in another place outside, small factory and a small unit, and we were doing a job on site, and I was putting up protective cage kind of for filings that they wanted, and I was just using box steel and some mesh, and so we had the steel all mitered and pre-cut in the factory, and we brought it down and attacked it all, measured it, had it all sort of looking good. And I said to the apprentice who was with me, he says, "I usually just do a couple of runs of weld on that." I said, "I just wanted to go to the toilet." Well, by the time I came back from the toilet, the boss was there. So what's he doing welding? And I said, "He's learning." Says no, his job is to carry your tools. So no, it's not. So his job is to learn. My job is to impart some knowledge onto him. And stories like that kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
From when I was in Inchicore. It was a great place. I loved it,
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough then later on to be manager of Inchicore for 4 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it for a local boy. It was a great achievement for me personally.
That's brilliant. It's good though, the way that those kind of little things kind of influence the way you kind of taught people then as you went through the years. But did you struggle? You left school early, right?
Yeah.
Did you struggle then when it came to the academic side of the apprenticeship? Because a lot of people, right, when they're in an apprenticeship, they're kind of like, or when they're young school leavers, they're like, "Oh, I just want to leave school. I'm not bothered with education." But actually, education is a really big part of an apprenticeship, and going to school and going to college, there's a lot more theory than you'd probably expect.
Mm-hmm.
For someone younger, maybe, right, that's going to leave school and they're probably not doing as well academically as they probably should be or could be. Do you think that, firstly, did it affect you leaving school early on the academic side of things? And then what advice then would you give to someone that is going to leave school early and take on an apprenticeship from an academic point of view?
I kind of struggled reverse-wise.
Okay.
In the sense of, I found the technical side difficult at the beginning.
Yeah.
The kind of bench fitting and turning and milling. Truth be told, I wasn't great.
Yeah.
I was average. But the academic side of it, I kind of excelled in. And I found because I suddenly understood it.
Yeah.
As I said, in school, like there was a tweet I saw yesterday from some lad who was 63. He says, "I'm 40 odd years out of school." He says, "And see, I've never once used algebra. Figure that." And that's sort of, I had a giggle to myself at that. So things like, when you're doing, particularly from a fitting point of view, and you're looking at blast furnaces and how steel is made, and you're looking at why stainless steel has a higher carbon content than maybe sort of, normal steel or mild steel.
Yeah.
And how it works and things like that, and how when you're machining different types of metals, how you need to approach it, what speed you need on a lathe or a milling machine and things. No, I know a lot of it's now CNC, and the kind of the old skill of a brilliant turner is not as, with the center lathe is not as sort of, because you have the machine that will do it for you, and that's understandable. But I've always found, the advice I give is that the technical side of it, or the academic side of it, once you understand how it applies to what you're doing, I think I found it becomes clearer. It was almost like kind of the fog was just kind of pushed away, and you start to see, it in an easier light. And that's the advice I'd give to people, in the sense of, yes, there is academics side of to apprenticeships, but because you're working on the job, that sort of becomes, it makes it more real. And like the Germany's been doing this for years, and not only in apprenticeships as we technically kind of look at them in Ireland, but in a wider range of different sort of facets of life and industry. And I think when you're learning on the job, any sort of academic side of it does become clearer.
Yeah, because you're getting that.
And because you can apply it more, and you're actually physically doing it.
Yeah.
And so you're thinking it through, and it becomes clearer in that sense.
Okay, grand. How did you get better over time, like on the fit, like the actual fitting side of things, or the more practical side of it? Like, how, just practice?
Oh, it's practice makes perfect. It really is. It's the more you do it, the more you sort of, like I can remember we used to have 60 used to be a pass in the fitting and turning practical exam.
Okay.
And at the very beginning, when I'd be handing up, I remember the first piece we had to do was actually just cut out a square of a piece of steel and foil it and make sure it was square, and using the square and all that, carry on. Yeah, straight edge and everything. And I think I scored 62.
Okay.
And I can remember my averages were around sort of 62, 63, things like that. But then sort of that started to creep up. As you're just getting more used to sort of not holding the foil like that or not holding it like that, and getting used to the even pressure and things like that. And it is all practice. Like I remember when I first came back into Irish Rail, and as it was then back in 1990, and I was maintenance on the locomotives, and the first time after about, I think it was 18 months, and the gaffer says, will you go out and see where the water leaking on that locomotive is, as a report of it's losing water. And you're sort of going, Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, but you've worked with guys who would have shown you how to do that, and never be afraid to ask. And it is just by practice and by doing, and just by not being afraid to ask. I've always been a big believer in that. You don't have to know everything. Nobody has to know everything.
Just ask. Yeah.
Just have to ask.
Grand. Like, when you were going through the apprenticeship then as well, right? Were you like staying back after hours to like learn how to weld or cut? Or like were you going home reading books? I know like YouTube wouldn't have been around back in the day.
No, definitely not.
So you couldn't look up, you couldn't look for a video advice or anything.
Yeah.
But like, were you doing anything like that, or was it just all during the workday?
No, it was just all during the workday, to be honest with you. If you were working overtime, and it was rare that back when I was an apprentice that we were allowed to work overtime, that the union rules were a bit more stricter. Like, firstly, I never did welding. The first time I started to weld was when I was, well, funny enough, I learned to weld at lunchtime, because one of the welders in the last workshop I was in said to me, come on, says he, at lunchtime we'll do a bit. And because, you know, at the union rules at the time where I weren't allowed.
You couldn't do it?
No, because we did a different trade for that. So we'd metal fabricators who did welding.
Oh, okay.
And that's just the way it was back in the day. And as I said, as the technology has moved, as the fleet has changed, like, I mean, the requirement for a craft worker has changed as well. Like, I mean, and we're not as strict in that sense. I think to the betterment of everybody, both the company, but in the individuals themselves, because it's more rounded in that sense. So we would have done a bit like that, you know, just on the side with it. And we would have done a bit in Bolton Street as well. They would let us do it there, you know. And so that's kind of the way it was back then.
And for everyone that doesn't know, right, including me, what does a fitter actually do in Irish Rail?
At the moment, the fitters would be sort of maintenance on the fleet itself, sort of the mechanical aspects of the fleet, so the wheels, the bogies, things like that. Because of the way the fleet has changed, and we've gone to a diesel kind of unit with engines underneath kind of the vehicles, that's why we've started to recruit more mechanics, and who are specialists in sort of engine work in that sense. But looking at the brakes, looking at the sort of the technical aspect of the train, the you know, that sort of thing, that's really what a fitter does. At the time, because we were loco hauled fleet, you know, maintenance on the locomotives would have been done by the fitters. In the machine shop, as it was at the time, we would have had sort of a tool room. There would be real specialists, highly skilled guys, you know, and then centre lathes, turret lathes, capstan lathes. It's all kind of done by CNC now. Yeah. In that sense, but that's the way it would have been at the time.
It's a lot more computerized now.
Yeah.
Okay. And are the fitters then now like working side by side by the mechanics, or would there be mechanics back in the day as well?
Not in Irish Rail, because as I said, the fitters would have been, that was the sort of along with the electrician, with the two kind of primary trades, and then you had the metal fabricators who would have worked in things like that. And for the organisation now, when you do need specialist welding that has to stand up to, you know, scrutiny in the sense of certificate welding and things like that, you do have to get specialist guys in who know how to do that. You know, wouldn't be that. But that's really what craft workers would do now.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of like Irish Rail, right, as a company and as a career option, would you recommend it?
I would, because and I think our chief executive officer is an example of it. Jim started as an apprentice fitter. He's a fitter by trade himself, and worked his way up. Even some of our other managers, they would have come in. A lot of them would have come in sort of off the platform, as we say. If you look at the operations side of the business, would have worked as a station operative. You see the guys checking tickets on the barriers and things like that, and they would have progressed to become drivers, to become traction executives, to become station managers and things like that. There is a great opportunity within our organisation to progress, and we've always prided ourselves on that. Even if you take some of our, you know, our chief engineers and things like that, they would have started as either electricians, gone on to, you know, to study engineering, or would have come in as just graduate engineers, straight out of school, 22 years of age, with a degree in civil or structural engineering, and would have progressed. We have great opportunities as a company to, and we pride ourselves on that, you know.
I know when you were taking on, right, you done your apprenticeship and then you kind of got let go
Yeah.
because, or you just got trained up and then you were moved on. And I think there was a downturn, was there?
Well, there was, yeah. In the late 80s, it wasn't. When I got let go, I was 9 weeks unemployed before I actually picked up a job.
Picked up a job. So,
You know.
not too long, but long enough.
Yeah,
I'd say, to pay the
no.
bills. But in terms of like RSL now, right, is the tenure is quite long for the average person that goes there? Like, is it a job for life, or has it changed over the years?
I think that personally looking at it, our turnover is pretty small.
Okay.
It is considered, I won't say job for life. I think this current generation, I don't think look on it in the same way as we would have.
Yeah.
The railway would have been, a good pensionable job. And the sort of 20, 21, 22-year-olds, I don't think are thinking that way. You know, we did. As a generation of people, and I think nowadays it tends to be more about not necessarily a career for people, but managing their own career for themselves. But there is huge opportunities within our organisation for it to be a job for life.
Okay.
There's great opportunities within the company. We run further education development programs, or FED as we like to call it. In that sense, and it gives people the opportunity. And I took advantage of it because I went to college then in '94. I started an undergrad in industrial relations and personal management. I was a trade union rep at the time, and the company supported me. They paid 50% of my learning. The company paid 100% then when I went to a master's in 2008. And the company supports people in that regard with education and development. So I know plenty of people that have started off in sort of one career path and ended up.
Yes.
Like myself, something completely different, miles away from what they ended up doing.
What was the progression route? So once you got let go, right, and you went back into RSL, how many years were you out before you kind of went back in?
I finished in September '87 and I started back in June in 1990. I worked for 3 small places in Dublin, and it was April 1990. There was a letter. And they were recruiting for craft workers. So what they did was they sent letters to come and contact them if they wanted to be considered for an interview for previous apprentices that had been let go. So I I'm from Inchicore, I'm a local lad in that sense. So I kind of said, fine. I applied back again, thinking, what was I? I was 20, just trying to think, it was 22, 23.
Yeah.
So again, thinking of more long-term security in that sense and getting a job back in the railway. So I applied, I was interviewed, there was jobs going at 4 locations. I was only really interested in the job in the running shed where I ended up working. There's still a few of my colleagues still there, and we had great times there and had great experiences there. And lucky enough to get offered a job there. So that's how I ended up back in.
Grant. And so once you were back in, then you moved into like a managerial position in the shop, did you? And then
No. I was working on the tools, and that involved shift work as well. I used to cover shift during the summer, so because it's 24/7 operation.
Yeah.
And as I said, I was a shop steward at the time, and I went back and I did a certificate in trade union studies.
Okay.
It was run by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions.
Yeah.
And the guy who was doing the course at the time said, listen, you're wasting your time finishing this. He said, I'd go out to Ranelagh, as it was at the time, now the National College of Ireland, which is down in Mare Street, lovely campus down there. And so I ended up going out to Ranelagh, studying for 4 years. Whilst I was to start to study, the company sent us on a training program. They wanted to bring in quality management systems.
Okay.
And so we were kind of stuck with people to do it, and because there wasn't that many in the quality team at the time, they were trying to cut down on the number of areas that they were covering. And our area, the running shed, was one, and said because they don't want to write work instructions or do operating procedures and things like that. And I just said at a meeting, I says, I know someone who'll do it. And they all looked at me and said, who? And I says, I'll do it. And there was all kind of furtive glances around it. And so the gaffer came to me afterwards and he said, were you serious? And I says, yeah, absolutely. So I ended up being transferred into the technical office then in Inchicore.
Okay.
So I was studying industrial relations, and then we got a new HR manager. I had a chat with him, and he said, would I like to come down and work in HR? And I said, I'd love to.
Yeah.
And so that's how I started then in 96.
96, and you've been in HR now since 96, have you?
I was worked in HR and centrally for about 2.5 years. I then worked with the Dart for 4 years. I did a job there. I moved back into HR for about 2 years. Worked in HR again. Then I got a job in operations as a HR manager, my first managerial positions. Then in 2007, I applied and I got offered the position of works manager in Inchicore. As I said, for a local boy, that was a big thing, you know. And I remember telling my mum when I got the job, and she said, "If your father was alive," and so I stopped, and the two of us were crying, hugging each other, and all of that.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, it was a tremendous achievement for me. Worked with some great guys, and one of the guys I worked with is now Joe. He's now our head of health and safety for the railway undertaking side of the business, and going well. Rory, another fellow who worked with us, is now he's now the works manager in Inchicore. So it's, as I said, it's a great opportunity. Did that for 4 years, then moved to the infrastructure side of the business for about 6 years, 6.5 years, and then into what I'm doing at the moment now.
Yeah. So what does like the head of HR Organisational Development do in RSL?
It's almost like I should have called it a minister without portfolio, as they say. But I started off kind of we're bringing in a new payroll system.
Yeah.
And we also then look to bring in a new human capital management system. So basically, it's tech for the HR business. And then I work on we have a people strategy that supports our overall business strategy. I work on that, and then I would also do kind of job evaluations for the organisation and things like that. So that's really what I do at the moment.
Keeping the organisation moving forward.
Trying to anyway, helping out in a sense of, when I say helping out, I mean whatever we're asked to do in that sense. So we do. It's very much whilst, you know, it's not sort of line HR, and I've two colleagues that kind of look after the two major businesses, and then a third colleague who looks after shared services, and they're dealing with sort of the day-to-day stuff of recruitment and workforce planning and things like that. So whilst I'm not involved in that, I'm looking more kind of helping the director HR in that sense, at looking at the wider things.
Okay, great. And I know you mentioned a while back there, one of the shops, it's 24/7. What was the working hours when you were an apprentice?
When I was an apprentice, it was really just Monday to Friday. You know, we used to do 8 to 5 with sort of 3/4 an hour for lunch. When I was on the tools, it was the same. We had day work and shift work. The shift workers used to do 8 to 4, kind of early, middle, and late type of night shift and things like that. And then sort of over a period of time, it changed. Now most of the Drogheda and Portlaoise are two main locations. They're kind of 12-hour shifts. But operating, as I said, the fleet operates 24/7 in that sense, you know. And like to say, you know, if you look at sort of obviously between daylight hours, we need the trains most of the time, and sort of a lot of the maintenance gets done now at night time and things like that. And for our infrastructure colleagues, that's the only time they can get access to the track and the signalling and things like that, you know, is at night time when trains aren't running. Okay. So it has changed a hell of a lot from when I started, you know.
Do you have a choice now, like when you take an apprenticeship, whether you work shift or is it just Monday to Friday?
No, I think when you go into the locations, whatever the work patterns is in the locations, apologies, that's what you will be working in that sense. Obviously, if you're in the first 3 or 4 weeks, you're not going to be asked to come in as sort of, you know, for a night twist or anything like that.
Yeah.
And because ultimately we've a duty of care to everybody as an organisation. Yeah. Just health and safety prerogatives that we have to sort of go through. So people have to sort of, this basic training that people have to do and things like that. And the same as anything else, be comfortable in how they're doing their jobs, you know?
Yeah. It's different, I suppose, every apprenticeship, like some, I think we're moving towards more 24/7 economy, right? So anyone is kind of, well, most people are doing like some kind of shift pattern in an apprenticeship nowadays. As an apprentice now going in, is it Monday to Friday still, or are you on the shift straight away into your apprenticeship?
Sorry, again, it depends on what workshop you're in. Like, I mean, if I'm an apprentice, say in the bogey shop in Inchicore, that's a Monday to Friday gig. You know, if there's overtime on a Saturday, you know, if there's a high production requirement or need, same in our wheel shop and things like that. But if I'm in Drogheda or Portlaoise, again, it depends on the work patterns of what's involved. I'm not 100% sure. It wouldn't be. You know, be sort of definitely chapter and verse on that, but it does all depend where you are as to what sort of work pattern you're on and how it all works together.
Okay, and if you could go back, right, and decide what out of 4 apprentices or apprenticeships that you could do, which one would you pick now? Would you still be a fitter, or would you pick the different one?
Funny, there's always great banter
Yeah.
in that sense between sort of a fitter and electrician, particularly as it was were the two sort of major trades in Irish Rail, you know, about which was the sort of the superior trade.
Right.
I think, like, what I always found as an apprentice, the electricians always had a bit more that they could do on the side.
Okay.
You know, rather than the fitters, you know, in that sense, from an IXER point of view. From that, I wouldn't change a thing.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I enjoyed the people I came across, the characters I came across. Some of them are no longer with us now. Some really, really great people, and they, you know, they sort of, these experiences are life experiences for individuals, and it's been great for me personally.
Yeah.
In that sense, but I think, you know, as philosophers would say, you're not going to be able to change it. So I sort of,
Yeah.
why look at it from that point of view? I've made some good choices in that regard. The ball has bounced a couple of times in my way, but I've taken it and ran with it.
Yeah.
In that sense, and I would say to people, like, I mean, if you just go for it, don't look back. Just always look forward.
It's fair enough. Good advice. And anyone that's going into an apprenticeship now with Irish Rail, what advice would you give them?
To be a sponge.
Okay.
Effectively is the one bit of advice I give anyone starting any role, to be a sponge. Sometimes learning not how to do something is as important as learning how to do it.
Yeah.
And not to be afraid to make mistakes, because I've yet to meet Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect, you know, in that regard, you know, or the perfect individual. I don't think they exist. We'll all make mistakes, but I mean, I think you need to be able to be in a safe environment to make mistakes, and I think that's important when people are learning how to do, and particularly from an apprenticeship's point of view.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of times now in my career where, you know, errors have been made and people tend to run for cover. And that's a human trait. That's human nature, and, you know, in that sense. But I personally, I'd rather sort of say, okay, listen, there was an error made. How can we make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
That's the way I'd look upon it. But yeah, be a sponge. Definitely take in as much as you can from that aspect. To ask questions constantly, you know when not to ask them, obviously, but but in the majority of times, to be honest, asking questions. And if you're unsure, ask.
Yeah.
You know,
That's fair enough.
it's like the same. Connor, I was slightly lost coming here this morning, and I rang you and I sort of met you, and that was fine. Then I knew where I was going.
Yeah.
But I could have been pig-headed and say, no, I'll find this place, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
You just have to be open to asking. And
absolutely,
understand
totally.
when to ask and when not to ask. It's an important part. Grant, yeah, look, I think that's it. Do you have anything else? Or?
No, thank you for the opportunity. It's been great. The job's been good to me. And I think, like, I mean, as a career choice for apprentices, we give a wide breadth of training. We give a wide breadth of learning, and there's great opportunities within our organisation to have a career, and have a career that's not just as a craft worker, but to go on and develop, and to sort of to be a leader within our organisation. I think that's open to everybody. Or if people are happy in themselves at being a craft worker, you know, to be conscious of the fact that, you know, we're helping to carry 50+ million people on an annual basis in our organisation safely. Yeah. And I think that's a great opportunity for everybody.
Yeah, and the apprentices or the craft trades
exactly
play a massive part in that.
They do, absolutely, they do. Like, I mean, our people that maintain the fleet, you know, maintain the track, maintain the signals. You know, we wouldn't be safe without these people. Yeah, and they're very much sort of front and centre as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, definitely. Just one more question before I let you go, right?
Yeah.
I know you mentioned before we kind of start recording that previously Irish Rail used to take on apprentices, and then once the apprenticeship was done, they kind of move you on. They wouldn't tend to keep everybody. Is that still the case, or once you qualified, or you kept on?
No, once you're qualified, we do now start to look at sort of, you know, where our vacancies are and where our development needs are in that sense. And I think at the time when if I go back to my time, it was more of I call it a social duty of the company to train people I don't think the company treats it as a social duty now. Whilst we do have that social contract to be, in that sense, we are very much looking when we do recruit for apprentices. It is a good career choice for us, and it is a long term. We're looking long term at that. Well, let's say long term. I don't want to be that far.
Yeah.
But there is opportunities once you finish your career with us.
Yeah, and it's good
Once
as
you
well.
finish your apprenticeship with us, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, it's good as well that you see like different craft workers that have taken on apprentices or that have been taken on as an apprentice move up through the ranks, and it gives probably a more holistic view of like strategy and formulation and implementation, and you know what's happening on the shop floor. You've got a good idea, I suppose, what's happening on the shop floor when you're making decisions now as the head of HR Organisational Development.
Well, yeah, but no, when I was works manager, the first thing we did when we went in and we started to tour the places, we started working on the basic sort of physiological aspects of how lads do their job.
Yeah.
And that includes where they change and where they take their break. I mean, you go, just tell you in college, you need to look after the sort of the base needs or requirements before you move on. So if you have people in a cold, drafty, with not a great place to change, and the environment isn't great, how are you going to get loads of production out of individual?
Yeah.
You're not. So we start and we look at that, and as a company we've made great strides in that regard, in relation to all our colleagues. So the same way, if you're driving a train, if you come in and your locker room is draught and cold and everything like that, and it's miserable out, and you doesn't put you in good humour to drive a train. So it's the same analogy no matter what sort of role you have in the organisation.
Yeah, it's definitely good. Look, thanks very much, John, for coming in and
Thank
sharing
you.
your experience. It's
Okay.
much appreciated. And look, if anyone's looking for a job in Irishell, it's just on the careers website.
Yeah, please do. We should be advertising in April, so it should be sort of coming soon. So just watch the space, as I say.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, thanks very much.
Thank you, Connor.